Welcome to the WCF Developer Screencast Series. My name is Aaron Sconard and I work for Pluralsight, a training company that provides both instructor-led and online courses for Microsoft developers. Visit pluralsight.com for more details. In this short screencast, I'm going to show you how to self-host WCF services in your own applications. So here we are in Visual Studio 2008, and we're working with this eval service library solution that we built in one of the previous screencasts. Here in this project, we have a simple implementation of a student evaluation service that allows you to submit and remove evals. Okay, and then we have this eval service website application that we built in a previous screencast that allowed us to host that service inside of IIS within an ASP.NET web application. What I want to show you in this screencast is how you can actually do that same type of thing, but in your own application. We want to self-host our eval service in, say, a console app or an NT service or a Windows Form application. There's lots of different scenarios where you might want to host a service inside of your own custom application. This is referred to as self-hosting in WCF. So to do this, let's just right-click and add a new project to our solution. And to keep things simple, let's just create a console app. And we'll call this eval service host. Okay, and then I'm going to add a few references to this project. I'll add a reference to our eval service library, and I'll also add a reference to system.serviceModel. That's where the APIs exist for the hosting classes. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new instance of a class called service host, and I'll bring in the namespace for system.serviceModel. I'll instantiate this and then specify the type of service that I want to host. In this case, it's our eval service class found in the eval service library. Okay, so I'll instantiate that guy. Then I'll say host.open to open the host, and that's the magic line of code that will read all the configuration about our service from the config file and then build the runtime to support all of those endpoints that it found. Okay, then after that I'll just say console.writeLine, and we'll print out eval service is up and running. And then we'll just wait for someone to press enter. So we'll just do a console.readline. And once they do a console.readline, we'll then do host.close to close the thing down. Okay? So that's what we need to do to actually host up our service. Now, in order for this to work properly, I'm also going to need an app.config file for this particular project where I can configure my WCF endpoints. So now I'll add another item to my project, and it's going to be an application config file. Okay, and then I could just go ahead and start typing in my WCF configuration here if I wanted to using the IntelliSense, or I can right click and say edit WCF configuration. I'm going to create a new service configuration. I'm going to browse to my service. Looks like it's not there yet. I probably should build my project before I continue. So let me build this solution. Then I'll go ahead and try that again. Edit WCF configuration, create new service. We'll browse for that service in our bin directory. There it is, eval service. That's the one we want to configure. What contract are we going to be using? Well, it's that iEval service contract. Let's create a new binding. Let's use HTTP for the first one. We'll do basic web services interoperability, so that'll give us the basic HTTP binding. And then for the address, let's just use a relative address of basic. Then we'll hit finish. Okay, and then we'll create another service endpoint. And this time we'll do the same type of thing, only this time when we get to this step, we'll say advanced web services interoperability. And then we'll use a relative address of dubs and then hit finish. Okay, now since both of these endpoints are using relative addresses, I will need a base address for HTTP. And we'll just make that base address something like this, localhost 8080 eval service. Okay? Now let's add another endpoint that uses a different protocol other than HTTP. So for this one, in fact, let's go ahead and delete this one and use that wizard. The wizard's kind of nice. We'll come back here and use the wizard once again. This time we'll select TCP. For the address, we'll say netTCP localhost 8888 eval service. We'll just use a absolute address this time. And we'll do one more of these that uses net name pipes. So we'll do it one more time. This time we'll select name pipes. And for this one, we'll just say localhost eval service, no port number. Finish. Okay, so now we have a service configured with 4 different endpoints. Now, if I want to enable metadata on my service, I'll also need to come down here into my advanced section, and for service behaviors, I'll need to add a new service behavior. And I'll have to add into this the service metadata behavior, just like that. Then I need to select it over here and say I want to enable HTTP GET requests. Okay, once I've done that, then I'll have metadata enabled on my service. Okay, then I need to apply that behavior configuration to my service by selecting it right up here. Okay, now I have metadata enabled. I can also add another service endpoint that's going to use metadata exchange. Let me try that using the wizard. So we'll come through here, and this isn't actually the one that I want to use. I want to use a different contract. It's going to be found in the GAC, and it will be found inside of system.serviceModel. So we'll come down here and select system.serviceModel. And then we should see iMetadata exchange in the list. That's the one I want to expose on there. And then I'll select a new binding configuration, HTTP. Actually, let's jump back here and just select one. Let's select the MEX HTTP binding, like that. That'll be easier. And then for the address, we'll use a relative address of MEX. Okay, and then hit finish. Okay, now we have 5 endpoints. One is a MEX endpoint. The other 4 expose iEval service contracts, each using slightly different communication details. Let's save it and close this window out. Then we can go and look at this thing, and you'll notice all that information was dropped in here for us automatically. So now I think we're ready to test our custom service host. So I'm going to right click and set this as the startup project and then press F5. This will go ahead and launch our eval service host. So now we're ready to test our custom eval service host, and I'm going to do that by pressing Control F5. Notice our console window comes up and it says eval service is up and running. Now how do we know it's really working? Well, let's launch Internet Explorer here and browse to our base HTTP address that we configured, which was localhost 8080 eval service. And let's see what we get back. If all goes well, and if our metadata behavior is actually enabled properly, we should get that documentation page back. We should now be able to browse to our WSDL definition. And if we wanted to, we could grab that base address right there, bring up a Visual Studio command prompt, and run our WCF test client, pasting in that base address. And we should be able to use this test client to hook up to our service and test it using one of these various endpoints. Let's use the TCP endpoint to submit just some simple eval into the system. Then let's use the name pipe endpoint to actually get the evals back out, and notice it all seems to be working properly. Now, within your host application, you could provide a little more detail within the UI around what endpoints are visible and what endpoints are actually active within that host. Let me just jump back here to our service host code and show you what I mean. Here, after we call open, we could do something like this, where we say for each service endpoint, let's bring in the namespace for that, se in host.description.endpoints, let's print out console.writeLine se.address.toString. Okay, like that. And right before we do that, we could say console.writeLine, and we could print out eval service is up and running with the following endpoints. Something like that right there. Okay? And actually, I don't want that line anymore down below. So now let's press Control F5 to run our host, and notice it says eval service is up and running with the following endpoints, and there you see the various different endpoints that are exposed. It looks like I dropped the right line right there. Let's go ahead and do that so it's a little easier to read. And we see that indeed our host is able to display that it's currently actively hosting 5 different endpoints, and these are the endpoint addresses that are currently active within this service host. So there you have a complete example of how you can host WCF services within your own applications. This is referred to once again as self-hosting. Thank you for watching this video in the WCF Developer Screencast series. You can find more in-depth online training videos at Pluralsight.com. Pluralsight offers an extensive library of online training courses covering a variety of current and emerging Microsoft technologies, and you can access this valuable content from anywhere, anytime within just a few clicks, while still learning from industry experts you trust. Check it out today at Pluralsight.com.